I bid thee welcome, lords and ladies of the realm, and now we move into our next unit of study, which is the medieval period. After the fall of Rome, historians sort of view ancient history as being over. And now we get into this new period of time that historians call the Middle Ages or the medieval period. Medieval is just Latin for Middle Ages. Medi meaning middle, eval meaning ages, medieval period. It's the Middle Ages in Europe. And it's this transitional time period from the ancient to the modern. It lasts about 1,000 years or so. And we're going to start our study of the medieval period with a period of time that we call the Dark Ages. And so what are we going to look at here today? Well, we'll start by looking at Europe after the fall of Rome. Okay, what is Europe like after the Roman Empire collapses in the West? What are the conditions? Why do historians, as a result, call this time period the Dark Ages? Despite the fact that it is a rather dark period of time, there are still very important, influential people doing very important things that will shape the next 1,000 years of history. So we'll start looking then at some of the important rulers of this time period, specifically rulers from the Germanic people known as the Franks. We'll figure out what makes the Franks so important, and then we'll look at some of the most significant Frankish leaders. Specifically, we'll meet Clovis, Charles Martel, Pepin, and Charlemagne, and see what important role they're going to play in this time period and what it's going to mean for Western Europe and history moving forward. Thus, without further ado, let's go ahead and begin. Okay, so by 500 AD, the Germanic invasions have destroyed the Roman Empire. And we have to remember that Rome was civilization. Rome was all things that, at the time, were modern. Rome was cities. Rome was paved streets. Rome was fresh, clean, running water through aqueducts. Rome was everything that made civilization great. It was education. It was architecture. It was monuments. And when Rome falls, all of that falls with it. When the Roman Empire falls, the urban, civilized world comes crashing down in Europe. Without Rome, trade goes into steep decline. The great network of roads that the Romans had built, the bridges that they built, fell into complete disrepair. Because without Rome, education is gone. Education vanishes. And without education, people don't know how to continue to keep up and maintain aqueducts, roads, and bridges. So these things all fall and collapse. And without the aqueducts, you lose running water in the cities. So people move out of the cities, they move back to water sources like the coast, like the rivers. The cities become very much like ghost towns. Everything that was great about Roman civilization is really disappearing. Without education, people lose the ability to read and write. We see society really regress by centuries, if not more. Without the Roman Empire in control, the strong central government that Rome provided, we see law and order completely vanish as Europe is basically ruled by military strongmen and warlords for a period of time. The economy collapses so poorly, we don't even see money being used anymore. People regress back to using barter and actual physical good-for-good trade. So society has really regressed and fallen back. And Western Europe is so backward during this time that historians refer to it as the Dark Ages. Now, like we said before, despite this being such sort of a dark, dreary, bad time, there are important rulers doing important things that are going to set the stage for the next 1,000 years of history. And all of that comes back to a group of people called the Franks. See, during the 400s, as the Roman Empire is waning, the Franks are beginning to emerge as the most powerful Germanic group in Europe. And the Franks are going to settle into what is present-day France and Western Germany. And they would be led by a line of kings, a line of rulers known as the Merovingians. The first of these Merovingian kings is a guy by the name of Clovis, and he comes to power in 481, really just a handful of years after the official fall of Rome. And Clovis takes power after the death of his father, Meroving, hence the name Merovingians. And as king, he's this brutal, cunning warrior, and through the years of his rule, he's going to carve out a kingdom in Western Europe that will be pretty much all of what is present-day France, a little bit of what will be Spain, and part of Germany. They'll expand even more of that beyond his lifetime. And the Frankish kingdom is going to become the most important and most powerful kingdom in Europe during the Dark Ages. This will be the real driver of events that are going to take place in Europe during this time. It's part of what makes the Franks so important. Now, 15 years after becoming king, Clovis does something else that's incredibly important. He becomes the first Germanic ruler to convert to Christianity, to accept Christianity as his religion. This is incredibly, incredibly important because it ensures that Christianity is going to survive as the main religion of Western Europe. But his conversion to Christianity has absolutely nothing to do with faith, absolutely nothing to do with religion, and everything to do with politics. His conversion benefits him because the people that he rules over are all Christian. He's their king, but he needs them to accept him. He needs them to support him. And Christians are not very likely to support a non-Christian barbarian king. Clovis recognizes this, so he converts to Christianity to gain the support of the people that he conquered. Additionally, the fall of Rome wasn't that long ago, and people still have memories of the greatness and the power of Rome. And Christianity was the religion of Rome. And by converting to Christianity, Clovis identifies himself with that power. So his conversion is not one of faith, but instead it's a way of getting support from the people that he conquered and identifying himself with the power of Rome to solidify his rule as king. Now, Clovis dies. The centuries pass, the kingdom of the Franks continues to grow. But as the kingdom of the Franks grows, the power of the Frankish kings really decreases. By the year 700, the real political power in the Frankish kingdom had passed away from the Merovingian kings and now lay in the hands of these officials that were called the mayor of the palace. The mayor of the palace in the Frankish kingdom, he's basically like the chief administrative officer of the kingdom, and he's also the general, the top military general for all of the kingdom's militaries. And by 732, the guy who became mayor of the palace was a fellow by the name of Charles the Hammer Martel. And Charles Martel becomes mayor of the palace at a time when a new threat is beginning to face Europe. If we remember when we studied world religions, it's during this time period that the Muslims, having pushed out of the Middle East throughout North Africa, have now moved into Europe and are rapidly expanding their territory. And it's at this very same time that Muslim armies from Spain are threatening and invading into present-day France, into the kingdom of the Franks. But in one of the most important events of the Dark Ages, Charles Martel manages to defeat the Franks at the Battle of Tours. Not the Franks, but he defeats the Muslims at the Battle of Tours. And this is an incredibly important battle, because if Charles Martel loses here, there's nothing else standing in the way of these Muslim armies sweeping across Europe. And who knows how history would be different had they won and moved into Western Europe. But Charles the Hammer Martel manages to defeat the Muslims at the Battle of Tours, saving the Frankish kingdom, and really, in all reality, saving Christianity in Western Europe, at least for the time being. This victory gives Charles Martel incredible prestige as the savior of Christianity, but it also maintains the existence of Christianity in Western Europe and ensures that it continues to be the dominant religion of Europe. As awesome as Charles the Hammer Martel turned out to be, he of course would not live forever, and after he died, his son Pepin the Short, you can guess what his most well-known physical attribute was. He was probably a short guy. Pepin the Short replaced his father as mayor of the palace in 741. But see, Pepin had ideas beyond just being mayor of the palace. He didn't want to just be mayor of the palace. He wanted to become king. Problem was there was no bloodline to give him the title of king. But remember, his family saved Christianity. He fought with his dad at the Battle of Tours, so he has a lot of influence with the church. And so he uses his influence with the Pope and with the bishops to help change the ruling dynasty of the Kingdom of the Franks. And so when the last Merovingian king dies, the Pope journeys to France to anoint Pepin as the new king. Now again, this is really important because in the eyes of the people, they need to see that he's the legitimate king. And with the Pope coming to anoint him and crown him king, this shows, or at least in the eyes of the people, makes them believe that he is the anointed, chosen by God, new king of the Franks. Of course, none of this comes without a price. The Pope isn't just going to come from Rome because he really wants you to be king. Pepin has to do something in return for the Pope and for the church. You see, in return for the Pope crowning him king, Pepin agrees to become the defender of the Pope and the defender of the church. And so in 754, Pepin carries out these duties by forcing a group of people called the Lombards, who were threatening Rome and threatening the Pope, to withdraw from the city of Rome. Pepin then went one step further. He seized the land from around Rome and gave this land to the Pope. This land, which the Pope will now begin to govern, would come to be known as the Papal States. And this connection between Pepin and the Pope would solidify a relationship between the papacy and the Franks. Really, from this point forward, whenever the Pope needs something, the Franks are going to be his go-to guys. All right, in 768, Pepin dies, and now his son, Charles, or Charlemagne, Charles the Great as he'll come to be known, replaced his daddy as king. And Charlemagne will go on to be the most important and the greatest monarch of this time period, perhaps the greatest monarch of all the Middle Ages. That remains to be seen. And Charlemagne's rise to power starts a new dynasty in the Frankish kingdom, the Carolingian dynasty. And like his ancestors before him, Charlemagne is a great military leader. And his military victories expand the borders of the Frankish lands to now include all of Germany, all of France, parts of Spain, and most of Italy. This great domain conquered by Charlemagne would come to be known as the Frankish Empire. And now, upon becoming king, Charlemagne not only inherited the throne, but he also inherited his father's responsibility of defending the Pope. And in the year 800, Charlemagne carried out this responsibility by defending the Pope, Pope Leo III, against the nobility in the city of Rome. Now, to show his gratitude, the Pope wanted to crown Charlemagne as the Emperor of the Romans, or what was otherwise known as the Holy Roman Emperor. And let's be clear about this. Being Holy Roman Emperor and the Holy Roman Empire is not holy, not Roman, and in no way being an emperor. But that's a whole other story that we'll have to get to. Now, Charlemagne, for his part, as the ruler of a vast territory, is already the most powerful man in Western Europe. And he's already the protector of the church anyway. The reason the Pope wants to crown him is because the Pope wants to have this unified Christian kingdom in Western Europe to sort of be a counterbalance to the expanding Muslim lands and Muslim empires and the Byzantine Empire in the East. And so, Charlemagne, even though he's already the most powerful guy, he's not too sure that he wants this title, that he wants this crown. And it has a lot to do with the optics, what it's going to look like. See, if a religious leader is to crown the king, then it makes it look like the clergy, those would be church officials, are superior to secular, that would be non-religious leaders. And in crowning Charlemagne, this is exactly what the Pope is trying to do. He's trying to demonstrate that the church is superior to political leaders. And it's pretty obvious that Charlemagne wasn't pleased with being crowned because he believed that his power was politically superior to that of the church. And he accepts the crown in this ceremony on Christmas Day. But this really touches off what will be a long-term power struggle between the church and between the monarchy. Popes will always believe that as religious and spiritual authorities, they have authority over political leaders. Political leaders will always believe that as the earthly leaders of their domains, they have authority over the church. And this is going to haunt the church and political leaders for centuries to come. Now, during the reign of Charlemagne, what we're seeing is that really for the first time since the fall of Rome, most of Western Europe is now ruled under one government. And this is really important because the lack of political stability is what contributed to the nasty times during the Dark Ages. Well, now, with most of Europe ruled under one government, political stability returns to Europe. Charlemagne recognizes this, and he recognizes that his kingdom is important, and it's very special, and he wants this kingdom to continue to last and prosper. And he also recognizes that if he wants his kingdom to last and prosper, he's going to need to bring back something else that's been gone since the fall of Rome, and that's education. And so in order to revive learning in Europe, Charlemagne began to open up schools throughout his empire. The first of which was in his capital, at Aachen, the palace school at Aachen, they called it. He brought the most educated man in Europe from England, a monk named Alcuin, to lead this school. And at this school, people could learn to read and learn to write. And of course, they did so in Latin, because the Bible was written in Latin, and Latin will thus be the language of educated people from here on out for a very long time. But with the return of education and the return of political stability, we start to see economic and social growth in Europe. Prosperity and civilization are returning after centuries of the Dark Ages after the fall of Rome. And it's all because of Charlemagne and this empire that he's built and the stability that he's brought and the education that's come back. So there's a little light in the darkness. The Dark Ages might have a chance of being over. Unfortunately, though, this rebirth of society is going to turn out to be only short-lived, as we will see in the future. All right, so what do we look at here today, guys? Well, we saw Europe after the fall of Rome. We looked at the really nasty conditions, and we saw why historians refer to this period as the Dark Ages. Then we met the Franks, figured out what made them important, and we met some of the more significant Frankish leaders. We saw the role they played in developing medieval Europe during this time, whether it was Clovis accepting Christianity, Charles Martel defeating the Muslims at the Battle of Tours, Pepin establishing the relationship between the Franks and the Pope, and Charlemagne rebuilding the stability of Europe. Take note of all these essential questions. Remember, we will discuss them. You need to study them, and I can't wait to talk about them when we all come back. But until that time, as always, I bid you farewell.